What if the most dangerous thing in the world of the ton is not scandal, but a man who refuses to be ashamed of who he loves? Because in Bridgerton Season 4, Part 2, this is no longer about secret glances behind fans or stolen moments in shadowed corridors. This is about exposure. This is about consequence. This is about a Bridgerton choosing love in the open and daring society to react. Benedict and Sophie's story does not continue softly. It explodes quietly. And once that shift happens, nothing in the ton remains untouched. The moment Part 2 begins, something feels different. The air is tighter. Conversations pause longer than they should. Eyes linger just a second too much. The ton has noticed. What once felt like a rumor is now a pattern. Benedict Bridgerton is not simply fascinated. He is committed. And commitment is far more dangerous than curiosity. Benedict has always lived slightly outside expectation. Not rebellious enough to cause alarm, but distant enough to be labeled the dreamer, the artist. The second son who did not carry the crushing weight of inheritance like Anthony, nor the romantic restlessness of Colin. He floated. He observed. He painted the world rather than confronting it. But loving Sophie forces him to stop floating, because Sophie does not exist in the comfortable space between rebellion and respectability. She exists on the outside. She has no powerful family name shielding her, no fortune softening judgment, no title to silence whispers. She is grace without protection. And in the world of the ton, that is a vulnerability. When their relationship begins to shift from hidden affection to visible attachment, society reacts in the only way it knows how, through silence first. Invitations that once arrived promptly now delay. Polite smiles stretch thin. Conversations that used to include Benedict suddenly redirect when Sophie approaches. No one says anything openly. They do not need to. Exclusion is louder than accusation. At first, Benedict believes he can manage it. He convinces himself that time will soften resistance, that if he continues to appear confident, unbothered, society will grow bored and move on. After all, the ton thrives on temporary scandal. It loves gossip, but it also loves distraction. What Benedict does not yet understand is that this is not entertaining gossip. This is structural disruption, because if a Bridgerton, a name built on prestige and carefully guarded respect, openly chooses someone without rank, it challenges an invisible contract. The entire system rests on strategic marriages, alliances, preservation of status. Love is celebrated only when it supports the structure. The moment it threatens it, love becomes irresponsible. Sophie sees the shift long before Benedict does. She notices the way women measure her with their eyes, the way older members of society speak to her with a sweetness that feels like warning rather than kindness. She understands the language of subtle rejection because she has lived inside it her entire life. But what makes Sophie powerful is that she does not bend. She does not overcompensate. She does not beg to belong. She stands beside Benedict with quiet composure, never clinging, never apologizing, and that calm strength unsettles people more than desperation ever could. The ton expects shame from someone in her position. It expects insecurity. It expects gratitude for attention. Instead, Sophie carries dignity, and dignity without permission is threatening. The true tension begins when Benedict realizes the cost is no longer theoretical. He overhears a conversation. Soft voices discussing how unfortunate it would be for the Bridgerton name to be attached to someone unsuitable. The word is spoken gently, almost kindly, but it lands sharply. Unsuitable. For the first time, Benedict feels anger not as passing irritation, but as something rooted deeper. He begins to see the world from Sophie's perspective. The invisible hierarchies, the quiet cruelty disguised as tradition. And that realization shifts something inside him. This is no longer about protecting a romance. It is about confronting a system. Yet conflict does not erupt loudly. That would be too easy. Instead, pressure builds in layers. Anthony watches carefully, not disapproving, but concerned. Violet senses the change in atmosphere. Her belief in love strong, yet tempered by understanding of society's limits. Conversations within the family grow more cautious. Questions are asked indirectly. Is Benedict certain? Does he understand the implications? Implications. Consequences. Reputation. Words that begin to crowd the space around him. For the first time in his life, Benedict feels what it means to represent more than himself. Every choice he makes echoes outward. Every appearance beside Sophie carries weight, and though he has always valued freedom, he now understands that true freedom requires courage. Sophie, meanwhile, carries a different burden. She knows what public rejection looks like. She knows how quickly admiration can transform into hostility. When whispers grow louder, she does not panic, but she prepares. She begins to emotionally brace herself, not for heartbreak from Benedict, but for rejection from the world. And that is where the emotional imbalance appears. Benedict wants to shield her. Sophie wants partnership, not protection. When he suggests they reduce public appearances temporarily, framing it as strategy, she sees it clearly for what it is: retreat. Not betrayal, not cowardice, but hesitation. And Sophie cannot build a future on hesitation. In a quiet but powerful exchange, she makes her position known. She will not be hidden for the sake of comfort. She will not become a secret disguised as safety. If he chooses her, he must choose her completely. That moment marks the turning point of Section 1, because Benedict finally understands the real question before him is not whether he loves Sophie. It is whether he is brave enough to love her without apology. The tone is watching now, waiting, expecting him to correct course, to return to the predictable path, to marry within rank and allow this phase to fade into polite memory. But something in Benedict has shifted permanently. For the first time, he begins to question not just society's judgment, but its authority. And once a man begins to question the rules that built his world, the world starts to feel unstable. The storm is no longer approaching. It has begun. The Tun does not attack immediately. It calculates. In the world of silk gowns and polished smiles, war is never declared loudly. It is waged through distance, through influence, through quiet decisions made behind closed doors. And as Part 2 continues, Benedict begins to understand that love is not only tested by emotion, it is tested by pressure. At first, the resistance remains social. A dinner invitation withdrawn, a charity event where his presence is acknowledged, but Sophie's is overlooked. Conversations that once flowed easily now pause when he enters the room. No direct insult, no open confrontation, just controlled exclusion. But exclusion is a message, and the message is clear: return to your place. Benedict feels it in every shifted glance. For years, he moved through society lightly, never carrying the burden of leadership like Anthony. He was allowed to be different because he was harmless, the artistic brother, the charming observer. But the moment his choices threaten the structure of expectation, that harmless label disappears. Now he is unpredictable, and unpredictable men make the Tun uneasy. What changes everything is not the gossip. It is the reaction inside his own home. The Bridgerton family does not turn against him. They love too deeply for that. But love does not erase concern. Anthony approaches him first, not as Viscount, but as brother. His words are careful. He speaks of responsibility, of legacy, of the weight that their name carries. Not as accusation, but as reminder. Every Bridgerton marriage shapes how the family is perceived, and perception, in their world, is currency. Benedict listens, and for the first time, he does not deflect with humor. Because Anthony is not wrong. The family name has opened doors for generations. It has protected them. It has allowed them to marry for love before, but always within acceptable lines. Even when scandal hovered in past seasons, it was resolved within boundaries. The rules bent, but they did not break. Choosing Sophie openly would break them. The unspoken question lingers in the room long after Anthony leaves. Is one love worth destabilizing everything that came before? Meanwhile, Sophie faces a different battlefield. The whispers grow sharper. This time they carry implication. Suggestions that she is ambitious, that she has somehow manipulated affection upward, that she knows exactly what she is doing. In this society, a woman without title who attracts a man of rank is rarely seen as innocent. She is seen as strategic, And that narrative spreads quickly because it protects the system. It is easier to believe Sophie is calculating than to admit the hierarchy is fragile. But Sophie refuses to defend herself publicly. She understands something that Benedict is still learning, that desperation feeds gossip. Silence, when paired with dignity, unsettles it. Yet even the strongest composure carries weight. In a quiet moment alone, we see her vulnerability. Not tears of weakness, but exhaustion. She has lived her entire life proving she deserves basic respect. Loving Benedict was never meant to become another performance of worthiness. She does not want to fight society every day just to stand beside the man she loves. And that truth begins to haunt Benedict, because the cost is no longer abstract. He starts noticing how rooms change temperature when she enters, how some women shift slightly away from her, how certain men look at her with thinly disguised judgment. For the first time in his privileged life, he sees how exclusion operates in plain sight. It angers him, but anger without direction is dangerous. At first, he reacts emotionally, a sharper tone during conversation, a pointed remark when someone hints at impropriety. He defends her reputation indirectly, thinking his status will silence doubt. Instead, it amplifies it. The ton thrives on reaction. The more he protects her publicly, the more people whisper privately, not because they believe the rumors, but because they resent the disruption. Benedict is not following the expected script. He is refusing to quietly correct what they see as a misstep. And then the pressure shifts from social to strategic. A potential business opportunity tied to the family is quietly delayed. A political alliance Anthony has been nurturing becomes uncertain. Nothing is directly blamed on Benedict, but the implication is there. Choices have consequences. The realization hits harder than gossip ever could. His love is no longer affecting only evenings and invitations. It is touching the broader stability of the Bridgerton position. For a brief moment, doubt surfaces. Not doubt about Sophie, but doubt about himself. Is he strong enough to carry this conflict without damaging the people he loves? Is his stand courageous or selfish? Sophie senses the shift before he speaks it. She sees the weight in his posture, the hesitation in his voice when conversations about the future arise, and instead of accusing him, she does something far more powerful. She offers him an exit. Not dramatically, not tearfully, simply honestly. She tells him she will not be the reason his family suffers, that she understands the reality of the world they live in, that she loves him enough to step back if he needs her to. That moment devastates him because it exposes the imbalance. She, who has the least protection, is willing to sacrifice first. She is ready to disappear quietly so his life remains intact. And Benedict realizes something painful. He has been measuring risk, but she has been living it. That clarity becomes his turning point. For the first time, he stops asking how to make the relationship easier. He starts asking why it should be easier for society instead of harder for injustice. The transformation is subtle at first. He stops lowering his voice when mentioning her name. He stops separating his public and private selves. When asked directly about Sophie, he answers directly, calmly, without defensiveness. And that composure is more powerful than outrage, because now he is not reacting. He is deciding. The ton notices the change immediately. There is no apology in his posture, no attempt to soften the reality. He is not positioning the relationship as temporary or experimental. He speaks of it as future. And future implies permanence. That is when tension crystallizes into confrontation. An influential figure, respected, controlled, deeply invested in maintaining order, finally addresses him directly at a gathering. The conversation is polite, but firm. Marriage, he is reminded, is not merely about affection. It is about duty, about aligning families, about preserving balance. The implication is unmistakable. You are risking more than yourself. The room falls quiet enough to feel heavy. This is the moment society expects him to retreat gracefully, to laugh lightly, to suggest that nothing has been decided, to reassure them that tradition remains intact. Instead, Benedict does something far more disruptive. He does not argue. He simply states that love, when honest, does not weaken legacy. It strengthens it. No raised voice, no dramatic declaration, just certainty. And certainty is dangerous because it cannot be negotiated. The silence that follows is colder than any whisper before it. Lines are being drawn now, not subtly, but clearly. By the end of Section 2, the conflict is no longer theoretical or social. It is ideological. Benedict is no longer drifting between worlds. He is standing in opposition to one. And the Ton has begun to realize something unsettling. He is not going to bend. The moment Benedict stops bending, the Ton stops pretending. Politeness fades, smiles thin. The atmosphere shifts from curiosity to control, because society can tolerate romance, but it cannot tolerate rebellion dressed as romance. And now, that is exactly what Benedict and Sophie represent. The whispers no longer hide behind elegance. They sharpen. Stories about Sophie's past begin to circulate. Small distortions at first, then larger assumptions. Questions about her upbringing, her connections, her intentions. None of it openly cruel, all of it carefully phrased as concern. Concern is the tone's most polished weapon. Benedict hears it from acquaintances who claim to care for his future. He is reminded again and again that marriage is strategy, that affection fades, that passion is temporary, but alliances are permanent. But something inside him has shifted beyond fear. For the first time in his life, Benedict feels clarity. Loving Sophie has forced him to examine every privilege he once carried without question. Doors opened for him because of his name. Respect offered before he earned it. Freedom granted because society trusted he would never threaten its structure. And now he understands the truth. He was allowed to be different, as long as he remained harmless. But loving Sophie makes him disruptive. Meanwhile, Sophie stands at the center of growing tension with a calm that unsettles even her critics. She does not respond to gossip. She does not chase validation. She carries herself exactly as she always has, poised, composed, dignified. But dignity in the face of rejection creates discomfort. Because if she were ashamed, society could feel justified. If she were desperate, they could feel superior. But she is neither. She stands beside Benedict as though she belongs there. And that quiet certainty shakes the foundation of hierarchy. The turning point arrives not with a scandal, but with a refusal. At a high-profile event, Sophie is subtly excluded from a conversation involving influential families. The message is intentional. She is being reminded of her place. Benedict sees it happen. For a moment, the old instinct rises, to smooth it over, to manage it privately, to avoid public tension, but then he looks at Sophie. She is not pleading, not embarrassed, just steady. And he realizes something powerful. If he stays silent now, he confirms the system. So instead of creating a scene, he does something far more radical. He crosses the room and stands beside her openly. Not defensively, not possessively, simply present. His presence shifts the balance immediately. Conversations falter, eyes turn. He does not demand inclusion, he creates it. And that act, simple, visible, undeniable, sends a ripple through the room. Because when a Bridgerton chooses where he stands, others must decide whether to step forward or step back. That night, the divide becomes clear. Some distance themselves. Others watch with growing curiosity. A few, quietly, show subtle support. A nod, a softened tone, a willingness to engage Sophie directly. Revolution does not begin loudly. It begins with discomfort. Inside the Bridgerton household, the tension deepens. Violet senses the change not as scandal, but as transformation. She sees something in Benedict she has never seen before. Resolve. Not impulsive emotion, not romantic idealism, conviction. Anthony struggles more visibly. As head of the family, he feels every social tremor. He knows alliances are fragile. He understands the cost of public defiance, but he also recognizes strength when he sees it. And for the first time, he does not see recklessness in his brother. He sees certainty. The true emotional climax of this section unfolds in a private conversation between Benedict and Sophie. Not dramatic, not explosive, honest. She tells him she does not want to be the reason he loses everything. He responds with a truth he has only just accepted himself, that walking away from her would be the real loss. Not reputation, not comfort, himayat. That is when love shifts from emotion to identity. He is no longer choosing Sophie to prove a point. He is choosing her because she represents the life he wants to live. A life not dictated by silent rules and inherited expectations. But society does not surrender quietly. A direct confrontation arrives soon after. An influential elder questions his intentions publicly, pressing him about marriage, about lineage, about responsibility to the family name. The implication is sharp. Personal happiness does not outweigh generational stability. This is the moment everyone has been waiting for, the opportunity for Benedict to retreat with dignity. Instead, he does something irreversible. He does not argue tradition, he redefines it. He states calmly that a legacy built on fear of judgment is not worth preserving, that love chosen freely is not weakness, it is strength, that the Bridgerton name was never meant to cage the people who carry it. The silence that follows is electric, because in that moment, the conversation shifts from Sophie's suitability to society's rigidity. And once that shift happens, control begins to slip. Some react with outrage, others with shock, but a quiet percentage respond with something more dangerous to the system: agreement. Young women watching from across the ballroom begin to reconsider their own futures. Young men bound by expectations start questioning whether obedience truly equals honor.